Greetings. I noticed I got a little sun today. I was at a Liberty Rising rally just a couple miles from my home. It was sponsored by the Businesses for Liberty. Go to businessesforliberty.com and support these patriotic business owners. Now, today we'll be covering lesson number 3, titled The Internet, a Great Source for Information, Misinformation, and Disinformation. Now, what's the difference between information, misinformation, and disinformation? All three can be taught or learned. All three are transmitted from a source of information to a consumer of information. But information, by its classical definition, is true, and the other forms are false. Hence, the fake news is often called false information. Yet the modern usage of information has expanded to include misinformation and disinformation, perhaps because we can't tell the difference. Using this broader definition, information only becomes knowledge when the information is true and assimilated into the memory by a consumer of information. It is not knowledge if the information is false or if the recipient can't remember it. Many people claim to know something, but if their source of information gave them false information, they have been deceived, which is worse than ignorance. Unfortunately, many popular sources today provide false information. These sources fall into two categories. Sources that deliberately lie to the public use disinformation campaigns to spread their lies. These are primary sources that control the original data and manipulate the facts to produce a false narrative. Disinformation is deliberate deception. Secondary sources are more numerous than the primary sources and often believe that disinformation is true. They do not intentionally lie, but they are misinformed and spread misinformation. Is the internet a reliable source of information? It's a great resource for information, but it is not a reliable source of knowledge. Google any topic and you'll find pros and cons and subtle differences in between. More often, there is a consensus among the so-called experts, while a smaller group claim the opposite. Invariably, the smaller group is right because the truth is rarely popular. For example, Google, is coconut oil healthy or unhealthy? You'll learn that coconut oil is extremely high in saturated fats. This is a fact. The medical experts then claim coconut oil is unhealthy because saturated fats raise the level of bad cholesterol, which increases the risk of heart disease. This sounds like a healthy argument, but it is based on the claim that all saturated fats are unhealthy, which has never been proven and is actually false. Google, are saturated fats healthy or unhealthy? And you'll find another layer of misinformation supported by disinformation. The experts claim that all saturated fats are terrible for your heart. But if you dig past the popular search results or modify your search to seek opposing views, you might discover the scientific studies that prove that natural saturated fats and natural cholesterol are not unhealthy, that all saturated fats are not the same, that processed saturated fats are terrible for your heart and health, but many natural fats are superfoods because they are packed with energy. You'll learn that coconut oil is a medium-chain triglyceride, which breaks down slower than the short-chain triglycerides found in processed saturated fats. And you'll discover that in the absence of carbohydrates, the fatty acids in virgin coconut oil are absorbed by the liver and converted into ketones, which provides instant fuel for your hungriest organ, your brain, which enhances your ability to discern the truth from deception. Ultimately, you'll realize you've been lied to for quite a while by many of your most trusted sources of information on nutrition and health. Why? Because bad cholesterol is big business for many industries, including the pharmaceutical, medical, and food industries. So while the consensus among those with PhDs is that coconut oil is a poison, a few health nuts claim that coconut oil is extremely beneficial, and they call it a superfood. The scientific evidence supports the nuts, while the popular belief is nuts, created through fake science and disinformation campaigns, and then popularized through misinformation campaigns from misinformed secondary sources. For example, your doctor probably parrots the disinformation about saturated fats because he or she is misinformed. Doctors are not trained in nutrition science. They also typically have little understanding of food engineering. Your doctor probably recommended decades ago that you switch from butter to margarine to help prevent heart disease. But instead, margarine promoted heart disease. It was terrible advice, as margarine contained the worst artificial fat ever created by humanity. In the mid-80s, I switched from margarine to butter. I grew up on margarine and liked it better, but my scientific training taught me otherwise, and I have never relied on any expert. That's just a side note. False information, though, can be deadly. Many who heeded their doctor's advice had their lives cut short by a premature heart attack. It is often difficult to determine the truth, especially if the topic is new and you have no prior information. The ability to sift truth from falsehood depends on the discernment of the consumer. Our lives have changed dramatically over the past 20 years because of the internet. Sometimes for good, but more often for evil. Pornography is now a widespread addiction through the click of a button. There's illegal trafficking of drugs, weapons, and children. There's constant surveillance and cyber crimes and countless distractions from reality. The internet has facilitated the spread of false information, and yet it has also enabled the spread of truth. This began as a trickle that couldn't be stopped. People who knew the truth spoke the truth, and they finally had a platform to reach a wider audience. This led to an awakening among the American people. Over the past decade, millions of Americans have discovered that most of our politicians are beholden to the special interests of big business and are handcuffed by bribery, blackmail, and other threats. Many learn that big banking is complicit. They've learned that whoever finances the political campaign is the boss, not the American people who pay their salaries. Many have discovered that big government, big business, and big banking grow fatter on the exploits of big military, which expends vast resources that often do more harm than good. With these discoveries, some think they've learned the whole truth and get sidetracked. They believe that big business, big banking, and big military are bad, but big government will solve all our problems, unaware of their cognitive dissonance in this thinking. Others dug deeper and discovered that big government, big business, and big banking are complicit with the mainstream media. They discovered that our news networks have major conflicts of interests with both their advertisers and their owners that prevent them from reporting the truth. Some went even deeper and learned that our mainstream media was infiltrated over 60 years ago by the CIA to control public opinion, hide their crimes, and keep the masses living in a delusion. And they've concluded that big news produces false narratives using disinformation. These discoveries have led millions of Americans to tune out the lies of the traditional news organizations. As their viewership declines, so does their relevance and power to control public opinion. The mainstream media supplies a continuous stream of bunk every day, but now they must debunk the truth whenever it gets coverage in the social media, because the truth reveals their lies. They'll begin with an ad hominem attack and call the truth a conspiracy theory, and then use logical fallacies that prove nothing, which only further alienates those who seek the truth. Over the past decade, more and more citizen journalists have arisen to fill the supply gap with objective reporting, and the truth is finally being reported, although under increasing censorship by big tech, and often hidden among the clutter of disinformation campaigns from the enemies of truth and misinformation campaigns from misguided secondary sources. Consequently, many Americans have learned the ultimate truth, that big government, big banking, big business, big military, big tech, big pharma, big food, and big news do not serve the interests of the American people. They are enemies of our republic and adversaries of liberty, truth, and justice. I'm not a citizen journalist. I'm a citizen philosopher and historian. I'll rarely discuss current events, but I'll focus on historical events and ideas that illuminate current events. I'll discuss facts that have been covered up by our mainstream media and our historians. I'll explain why they are hidden and why they are relevant today. Thank you.